Okay, this is our weekly Tanya class. We are in Shaar, HaYichud, VeHaEmunah, the second volume of Tanya, specifically in which chapter now? 6, right. We've been doing a chapter a week. Actually, we started with the intro, the Hakdama, the preface, called Chanech L'Nar, and we took a week on that, one class on that, and then we did chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each one of them in their own week. Let's do a little review. How many chapters total in Shaar, HaYichud, VeHaEmunah? 12. Very good. 12 chapters total. Okay. I'm not going to say we're halfway through because we're really not, because chapter 7 is super, super long. Chapter 7 is like as long as 3 or 4 chapters. So
the antithesis of chapter 5.
Yeah, chapter 5 is super short. Very good. Okay. So let's just really quickly review where we've been. Chapter 1, let's go back to the introduction. The introduction, Chanech L'Nar Al Pi Darkai, what we said is that the chinuch, so to speak, the training of loving Hashem is learning how to meditate on Hashem's greatness, and that brings to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and that even the tzaddik who graduates to the level of Avodah Rabbah, which is this love of Hashem that's gifted to him, that's a supernatural ability that's above what a human being can attain on his own, nevertheless, he will, in interim phases, go back to the basic style of cultivating love and awe of Hashem through meditation, like we all do. So the bottom line is it's so important to have what to think about Hashem so that you can actually come to feel more about Hashem. And we said the main thing we're going to learn about Hashem that we can meditate on that will bring us to love and awe of Hashem is Hashem's oneness. Okay, that was the end of the preface. Chapter 1 said we're going to introduce the concept of the oisius, the letters. Hashem is speaking the world into being. If he would stop speaking it into being, it would immediately, instantaneously revert to its previous essence of non-existence. That was chapter 1. Chapter 2, we said, I got a metaphor for you. The most iconic miracle, the splitting of the sea. Yeah, the ongoing existence of creation is much more miraculous and inexplicable and uniquely godly than even the splitting of the sea. Because the splitting of the sea, we said, was something acting upon a something. And the existence of creation is something emerging from nothing, which is much more radical. And then he makes that Kal v'chomer argument that, and even with the splitting of the sea, there had to be a constant exertion of the force, or the condition of the split would immediately cease. So too, without Hashem constantly imposing createdness upon the raw materials of creation, which is non-existence, that would revert to non-existence. That was chapter 2. Chapter 3, we gave the metaphor of the sun rays within the sun. We said the truth is, because of the utter dependence of creation upon the Creator, they really don't have an independent or distinct existence. They're more like the sun rays, which are an extension of the sun. And in fact, if you trace them to the sun, you don't find more sun rays, you find less sun rays, because in relationship to their source, they don't have a distinct, discrete existence. And then we ended off chapter 3 with a cliffhanger, which was, yeah, and if that's true, then why does anything appear to exist? We should just see the truth that it's all sun rays in the sun. So far, so good? You following this? Sounds familiar? Chapter 4, we introduced the concept of tzimtzum. We said that, well, this is the restraining power of Hashem, that he's able to hide the sun, so to speak, so that you see the sun rays. To hide Creator so that you see creation. Chapter 5 was and also very important to mention, chapter 4 is when we learned the name Havaya, what the name Havaya means. And Havaya is that which brings into being constantly. The Yud means constant action, and the root verb, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey, means bringing into being. Okay. Chapter 5 was that short, dense little chapter, which is very heavily Kabbalistic, but basically, as we explained it last week, it's here. Remember, it starts with Hashem. Initially, it's from a Medrash, not from Kabbalah, but then he goes into Kabbalah. Originally, Hashem thought to create the world solely with Midas Hadin. He saw that it was unsustainable. So he brought in Midas HaRachamim. So at any rate, the bottom line of chapter 5 was to understand that creation is not just the phenomenon of concealment. Tzimtzum is not just an absence of something. It is godliness, just like the light is a real entity. So too the tzimtzum, the kalim, the containers are a real entity, and creation is not an illusion. Very important to understand as far as the significance of mitzvahs. Okay, so that was chapter 5. Now we're on chapter 6. Does this all sound familiar? Yes. That's fantastic. Okay. Before we go into chapter 6, I'm going to do a commercial here. And people watching this a few days from now are going to be like, this doesn't pertain to me. You're right, but there are some people who are going to hear it now. We're doing our yearly fundraiser for SoulWords. SoulWords is the collective banner under which I do all of my stuff online. But now this year we're taking it to a new level. We're shifting from being basically all virtual to having a physical space. So we procured a property, a block from the Eihel, from the resting place of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Queens, and it's going to be the SoulWords house where we will have meetings and classes and verbrengens and events, and also the basement, the first floor downstairs will be our completely new state-of-the-art podcast recording studio, video production facilities. It's a very exciting new development, but we need to raise a ton of money. So go to charity with a D, charity.com/RST. And if you are listening to this right now or watching this right now, that means you are following the Tanya class. So if you want to show loyalty to the Tanya class and to all the people, these voices that you hear in the background, who enrich our Tanya learning experience, then you could donate under their team. What do we call the team? What was the name of the team? Five Towns Tanya team. Okay, but it really doesn't, I mean, I don't want to say it doesn't matter because the teams are fun, but the main thing is give the money, okay, because we need it. We really. Last year, we had 2,112 people donate, not 2,000, 1,000, I'm sorry. I wish it was 2,000. 1,112 people donated, which was really awesome because I was trying to hit 1,000. I was trying to see if I could break 1,000, and we got to 1,112. So this year I have this goal of trying to get 1,500 donors. So what that means is, yes, big gifts are extremely appreciated, but if you give $1, that also counts. So give, even if it's a small amount. Tell your friends to give, even if it's a small amount, because personally I have this goal of seeing if we can get 1,500 people to give this year. Okay, thank you. All right. Oh yeah, and it's matched, of course, and that's also kind of the urgency of it. June 18th and 19th, I should mention the dates. But go now, charity.com/RST. I'll put the link in the description, and the donate button works now. You don't have to wait till June 18th, 19th. But June 18th and 19th is when it's officially on, and then at the end of the campaign, it's over. And basically, what does the end of the campaign means? The matching dollars no longer come in. So right now, every dollar you donate is getting matched by matchers. So that's why it's more leverage and more urgent to do it now. Sorry for the advertisement, but that's what makes all of this possible. Okay. Perek Vav, chapter 6. V'hinei Shem Elokim hu Shem midas hagvura v'atzimtzum. The name Elokim is the name of gvura and tzimtzum, of restraint and contraction. Now we learned the name Havaya in chapter 4, and I mentioned it when we did our little review. That Havaya means he who constantly brings existence into being. Now we're going to learn about the name Elokim. V'lochin hu gam kein b'gematria hatava. That's why the name Elokim also has the numerical value hatava. Remember one time I was a bacher in yeshiva, and this guy comes back from Mitzrayim. That's on Friday afternoon when we would go out in the street corners and ask people, "Excuse me, sir, are you Jewish? Excuse me, ma'am, are you Jewish? Would you like to put on tefillin? Would you like to light Shabbos candles?" So he comes back, and I always had an aversion for getting into debates. I know you might think that as a bacher, like this guy who's going to grow up and make videos and put them out all over and talk all the time, that he probably loved to get into conversations on street corners with people. No, I did not like conversations. I would ask people politely, "Do you want to do a mitzvah?" If they didn't, I would wish them good Shabbos and move on. And I actually was be kind of annoyed. Some of my friends would get into these long discussions, and they would try to debate. They basically try to debate. So I remember this one guy was always getting to like an hour-long debate with some stranger, and I always thought that was like, how many people could you put tefillin on with during that hour of debate? Anyways, he comes back and he's like, I was debating with this guy and debating, and he was an Israeli guy, so he knew Hebrew, and I told him Elokim is the same gematria as Tava. And he counted it up, and he's like, no, it's not. And I'm like, oh, yeah, hold on a second. I counted it, and it wasn't. And I looked like such a fool, and that was supposed to be my winning argument, and then my whole argument fell apart. And I said to him, I remember it was Friday night, I was at the meal. I said, because Elokim is not the gematria of Tava. It's the gematria of Ha-Tava. You forgot the He.
Gematria number?
Ha-Tava is 86, and Elokim is 86. But he forgot the He, Hayediah, the definite article, so he was getting 81. And it's very important that you have the definite article, because it doesn't just mean a nature, it means the nature. What's the nature? The nature of created existence as we know it. That predictable nature that makes things seem so natural and not, that's kind of redundant. Nature makes things seem predictable and natural, yes. But the point is, that predictable nature that makes things seem that they're not miraculous because they're so predictable, that is a godly power. So what we're about to say is just like Havaya is a godly power, meaning the power to produce existence out of nothingness, so too the ability to mask that and to hide behind the predictability of nature is also a uniquely godly power. Like we were saying in chapter 4, don't think that that's nothing. Don't think that's the absence of godliness. That is also a function of godliness, as we explained at length in chapter 4. Okay, so Elokim is Hatava, Lefi Shemastera Or Shalamayla Hamahava Machaya Ho'elam. Because Elokim hides the light from above that is bringing the world into being and giving it life. V'nira, and therefore things appear, Ki'ilu Ho'elam Oimid Misnag B'derech Hatava, as if the world were just running on its own in a natural way. V'shem Elokim Zeh, and this name Elokim, Hu Mogen V'nartik L'Shem Havaya, is a shield, or a filter, or a buffer for the name Havaya. That's familiar, right? We learned that? Where did we learn that? Kishamish Amogen Havaya Elokim? Wasn't that chapter 3?
The sunrise?
I'm sorry, chapter 4. No, the sunrise is in Likutei Amorim Chelik Aleph. Actually, it was a sunset, but at any rate, Kishamish Amogen Havaya Elokim, that Hashem is a sun and its shield. Well,
Chapter 4.
Yeah, chapter 4, right. Chapter 3 has the sun rays within the sun. Chapter 4 has Kishemesh Shemogin Havaya Elokim. Right. So Kishemesh Shemogin, Hashem, Havaya, is the Shemesh, the sun. And he's also Mogain, the shield that diminishes the power of the sun, which is Elokim. He's both. And that's going to be very important. He is the sun and also what's blocking the sun. Hey, I can't see the sun because it's being blocked. What's it being blocked by? Havaya is being blocked by Elokim. Now,
Actually being blocked by Elokim?
well, yes. Yes, well, here's the thing.
A full block or?
Here's the important thing. We didn't say it yet, but we're about to say it yet. First of all, from his perspective, no, it's a one-way mirror. So the manager of the grocery store can see you shoplifting. Okay? I'm not accusing you of shoplifting at the grocery store. I'm just saying, if you were to shoplift at the grocery store, the manager sees it. Okay, it's a one-way mirror. You ever noticed that? I don't know if they do it anymore because they have cameras, but when I was a kid, I remember being blown away by all the mirrors up high over the aisles. And then I found out there was like a second story of the grocery store where the managers hung out. So it's a one-way mirror. But secondly, what we're about to talk about, and this is the really important point, is yes, Elokim is really blocking Havaya. I can't see Havaya because I'm only seeing Elokim, meaning Elokim b'gematria hatava. But when I realize, I don't want to give away the punchline, but this is the punchline of this chapter, that Hashem is Elokim, I can't see God because he's being blocked. By what? By God. Havaya is God, Elokim is God. So if Elokim is blocking Havaya, I can't see Hashem because he's being blocked by Hashem. So even when I'm not seeing Hashem, what am I seeing? Hashem. But we're going to get to that. We're going to build up to that. Okay. Let's continue. So this name, Elokim, we said, is like a shield to hide, lahailim, to conceal, ha'or v'hachayis, the life, the light and the life, hanimshich mishem Havaya, that's coming forth from Havaya, Mahavamayim Liyashin, giving existence from nothingness. But the name Elokim is blocking that. Shaloi yisgalad nivroi v'yabatlu b'metzias, so that doesn't become revealed to the created beings and cause them to be nullified out of existence. They would lose their separateness. They would be like sun rays within the sun. V'arei b'chinas gvura zu v'tzimtum hazeh. Now this quality of gvura and tzimtum, gvura is restraining, tzimtum is contraction, who gam kein bechinas chesed shoylam yiboneh boy, is also chesed, paradoxically. So the fact that Havaya is chesed, that we even said before in chapter 4, the fact that Havaya is chesed, that's not surprising. Chesed is gdula, expansiveness. So chesed is expansiveness. Hashem's tendency to create, to put something out there, to make, that we understand is chesed. What we're saying is, no, but also the opposite energy, the counter force to that creative energy, is also chesed. How is it also chesed? It's the opposite of chesed. Well, he explains. It's the gvura within chesed. And we're going to explain that in Hashem's qualities, there is really no contradiction. There's absolute unity between the attributes. VeHaEmunah, I'm going to go back to what it means that this gvura is actually a type of chesed, but I just want to read these lines. VeHaEmunah hiskalus hamidas zu b'zu. And you see how the qualities of Hashem are inter-included with each other. Then you see what the Zohar says, that he and his midos are one. You see that clearly. Because his attributes are one with him. They are united with each other. The attributes are united with each other, and they include each other. Like Elijah the prophet says in the introduction to Tikkun Zohar, which many people say out of Shabbos in the Pasuk Elio, Va'antu the Kasha Loinim Yachid Loin V'chulu, you Hashem are the one who connects and unites them, meaning the midos, the attributes. Uvar minach leis yichuda bi'lo yichulu, and without you, there is no unity in the upper realms. So the concept here is that even when you have seemingly opposite attributes, but being that they are Hashem's attributes, they are one with Him and they are one with each other, and there actually is no contradiction. Now, what does that mean? In a specific example, let's go back to what he was saying before, that even Hashem's concealment is a form of revelation, that the Shem Elokim is also chesed, just like Havaya is chesed. What we were saying, remember the end of chapter 4 when we're talking about the restraining forces, the gvuros of Atik and the Mansapach and the Matzah Sapeh and the friction in the mouth where you stop the airflow in order to make communicative speech. So we were speaking about the idea that when something's completely unbridled, when there's no stopping, when there's no form, when there's no contours, that's not communicative, that's not expressive. So ironically, the pausing and the shaping and the limitation is just as much part of the giving, meaning the putting brakes on the giving, is just as much part of the giving as the giving is the giving. So can we really say that Shem Elokim is doing the opposite function as Havaya? Or we're saying, well, it appears like they're acting in opposite ways. Havaya is the one who's projecting creation into being. Elokim is the one that's hiding the fact that that's what's happening. But really, they're working in tandem to produce one result, which is creation as we know it. And both of them are integral to that process, and both of them are uniquely godly and incomprehensible, as we were saying earlier, that you require both of them. So the concept here is that we really, really need to appreciate Elokim. Why is he stressing appreciating Elokim? Because Havaya is easier to appreciate. When you think of godliness, Havaya is like kind of the default thought. Like, oh yeah, the creator, the one who's the source, the giver, the one who's making everything, the prime mover. That's an easy, relatively easy way of thinking of Hashem. The Elokim part takes a little more maturity, because then you got to realize, hold on, even when he's not doing that, that's also godly. The way that he's holding it back, the way that he's giving containers to it so that there's room for the feeling of separate existence, that's also a uniquely godly power. We're following this?
Yeah, but why do we need separate existence?
Why do we need separate existence? Okay, that's a fair enough question. You're asking us to go back to the basic premise. And not only why do we need separate existence, but how come every time the Alter Rebbe says, and if Hashem would cease imposing creation upon the nothingness and turning into somethingness, it would revert to ayin ve'efes, it would revert to nothingness, chas v'shalom. You notice that? He'll say chas v'shalom. Why chas v'shalom? I mean, chas v'shalom means heaven forfend. Why heaven forfend? That's what it was like for an eternity. So what does it matter if it goes back to that? It won't hurt. You won't even know. You won't even know. You will have never have existed. Yeah. So obviously Hashem's will is that there be a creation. And as you learn in VeHaEmunah Chelik Aleph in the first volume of Tanya, specifically in chapters 35, 36, and 37, that the whole point of existence is Dira B'Tachtenim, that Hashem desires in the deepest possible way, in ways that are beyond our ability to even relate to. Hashem desires a dwelling place in the lower realms. So he wants that paradox of being fully expressed in a realm of separation. So that's the importance of the realm of separation.
So it's about him.
Yeah, it is about him, of course. It always goes back to him.
So that's really hard to grapple with when we're experiencing Elokim, and we need to use a lot of maturity to understand that
Yeah.
that's kindness, and that's
Right.
really like,
To understand that it's not abandonment.
it's not abandonment, it's,
Yeah.
it's part of the design to have this unification
Yes.
to bring creation to fruition.
Yeah.
We need to hold on to that, use maturity, and when we trail that back, why? So there's room for separate existence. Why? So we can create a zero protectoning
Yes.
for Hashem.
Yes.
That's really hard. Like, what's in it for me?
Yeah, and what's in it for you? Yeah, and so we could just.
You know, like
What we could do is we could say, you know what, this worldview that Tanya is teaching is too demanding. So we're gonna. If I'm a good salesman, I'm gonna say, this is too lofty. I'm gonna move you over. Oh, could I interest you in a little Elam Haba? So be a good Jew. What's in it for you? I got a eternal pleasure in the world to come, and we could just shift you over to that. Or we could be grown-ups and we could say, you want to know the truth? Eternal pleasure in the world to come is very nice. It's very nice. But the real point of it all is Hashem's pleasure that you are part of providing in the most wondrous, inexplicable way, where you are more one with him in your embodiment than in having never been created. Where infinity is more expressed in the time-space continuum than in the eternity that existed before creation.
Isn't it kind of a revelation more than kind of in all powers, so to speak, for Hashem? Like if you want to say like after death versus after revelation.
You're saying which does the soul get more pleasure from? Probably from the world of souls, because it's built for that. It's a pleasure machine for souls. But that's neither here nor there.
I mean after revelation.
The point is, well, it is about pleasure, Hashem's pleasure.
Right, not our pleasure.
Yeah.
But your soul
Yeah,
is a
we
fellow-
are, but that's what we were built for. And if you need a little bit of a selfish pitch to get you through,
to get you through the
okay, so I'll give you a selfish pitch, which is you may not like it. You may say, why was it built this way? But the fact is that this is how it was built. And we are most content and most healthy, and we feel like ourselves when we're operating within our design, the way that we were built. So when we accept the fact that embodiment and the feeling of separation is called the ego, that all of that it's not a bug, it's a feature. That's the result of Shem Elokim giving us that sense of separateness so that we can be involved in creating an even greater oneness than had all of that never existed. So then you'll also, if you go with that, that's also better for you. It's also better for you.
But a lot of people can't get there, considering all of their, past history, traumas, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They have a very hard time letting go of that ego because
Yeah.
they think that's who they are.
Yeah.
You know it's
And
not who you are. It's still hard.
so one response to that is that we could try to talk through all of this and convince you to believe in a system before we teach you what that system is. Or we could say, you know what? We trust the power of these words. We're going to learn about this system. We're going to learn the truth. We're going to learn how reality works. And even though it might hit some trigger points, we're going to learn about it, and we're going to be better for it. And certainly the world will be better for our having learned it. That's our approach. When I say our approach, I mean the approach I decided on before I walked into the room, and that you're all basically stuck with. So that's our approach, is that our human resistance to some of this is natural and valid, but that the best response to it is just keep learning it. Keep learning it, because this is a very robust narrative. And the more that this description of reality takes form and color in your mind, the more actually will bring you that peace and serenity that you're talking about. But that's not the pitch. The pitch is, like he said in the Hakdama, you want to love Hashem more, you want more of Hashem, this is the path to it. Will it also bring more serenity in your life? Yes, it will.
When you say this is the description of reality, whose description is it?
Whose description? The Alter Rebbe is our tour guide. He told us in the beginning of the book that it's Melukat Mipi Sfarim Mipi Sofrim, that it's from texts and from teachers. So he's basing himself on generations of tradition, namely the Kabbalistic tradition. And in the next chapter, in chapter 7, we're even going to get into some excitement, some machlokes about how to understand that tradition. Because there's actually, there's a big contention about how to understand Tzimtzum. We're going to get to it in chapter 7. Yeah. And I'll even give you a little bit of the historical context for that if we get to chapter 7. Okay, let's keep, that was my hint for saying let's keep going. All right. All right. Now here's a great line. What do I mean? They're all great lines. Here's a line I like. I enjoy this line. V'zeh shekosov, and this is what it means. V'sheveisa levavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim. Remember the beginning of chapter 1? We said there's this verse. V'yadaita yem. You should note it. V'sheveisa levavecha. Take this really seriously. Put it on your heart. That in the heavens above and the earth below, there is none else. Hashem Elokim, there is none else. So now we're going back to that verse. We're saying this is what it means. This is what it means. Pirush. Here's the meaning. Sheshnei Shemois Elu. These two names. What two names? Havaya and Elokim. So when we say Havaya hu Elokim, that's a very important statement. These two Shemois, Heim Echod Mamash, are literally one. They're literally one. Shegam Shem Elokim, that even the name Elokim, Hamitzam to Mailim Ha'or, which contracts and hides the light. Hu Bechinas Chesed is also Chesed. Kemei Shem Havaya, just like the name Havaya is. Mishum Shemidaisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Misyachtes Imai B'Yichud Gomer, because Hashem's attributes are totally one with Him. V'hu u'shmei Echad, and He and His name are one. Shemedais of Hein Shemais of his midas, his attributes are his names. So when we say his name is one with him, what we're saying is his attributes are one with him. The imkain, if so, if all of that is true, that there's really no distinction. I mean, there is a distinction between how Havaya operates and how Elokim operates. That's true. But there's really no essential distinction as far as they're both God. They're both accomplishing the same end goal for the same end purpose. The imkain, if so, mimela teda, you will automatically know. Here's a logical conclusion that you can come to. Shebeshamayim imal, v'ala oretz mitochas. These are the words from that original verse from the beginning of chapter 1. That in the heavens above and on the earth below, ein oid, there's nothing else. Pirush, what does that mean? Shagama oretz achumras sheniris yesh gamer le'ein koil. Even the physical earth, which really appears to exist, he ein ve'efes mamash, is nothingness. Lagabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in relation to Hashem. Why? Ki Shem Elokim einem ma'ilum matzamtzum ela l'tachtenu. Because this name Elokim is only concealing from our perspective, the one-way mirror at the grocery store. V'loi lagabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not from Hashem's perspective. Miyach shehu shmei Elokim echad, because he and his name Elokim are one. You understand why it doesn't conceal from him? It is him. So if I tell you, you can't see me because I'm covering my face, so you don't see me. Well, you don't see my face, but you see me. My hand is me. I'm covering me with me.
You don't see us.
I don't see you, but I can go like this. My daughter on Shabbos found a snail, and she accidentally touched it, and she was grossed out by it. And so we spoke about it, and I told her that a snail is an interesting thing, because when you touch the snail, you touch the shell, right? But you don't say I touched the snail's shell, you say I touched the snail. She touched the shell, not the gooey part. So I said, it's interesting. Is the shell what the snail lives in, or is the shell the snail? She thought about it, she's like, well, I guess it's the snail, because when I touched the shell, I didn't say I touched the snail shell, I said I touched the snail.
And when it separates, it's a slug, not a snail.
So are slugs a different species, or are they just homeless snails? Okay. At any rate, there's a line from the Zohar, which is actually brought in VeHaEmunah Chelik Aleph, which is Kahadein Kamtza. Now, Kamtza can be translated as a turtle or a snail. But my daughter encountered a snail, not a turtle, so I translated it. I told her that it could also be a turtle, but in that case, the metaphor is the same, so it's an identical point. Kahadin kamtza, like that snail or turtle, dilvushay mineu bei, whose clothing are one with it. When Elokim is covering Havaya, it's true. You're not perceiving Havaya because Elokim is covering it. But you don't say, I didn't see the snail. Oh, I didn't see a snail. I only saw the snail's shell. Yeah, that's the snail. When you don't see Havaya because Elokim is... well, first of all, you don't see Havaya. Why don't you see Havaya? Because something's covering it. What is covering it? Elokim. So what are you seeing? Elokim. But Havaya hu Elokim. So when you don't see God, it's because he's being blocked by something. By what something? Something other than God? Chas v'shalom. There is nothing other. Blocked by himself. So you're seeing more of himself. There's actually, in halacha, a concept of... so a man has to cover his head. There's a question whether or not you can... Now, I'm not talking about a double head covering where you could put your hand on top of your yarmulke, and I'll explain... Well, you'll explain to me why that's different. But let's say for your first head covering, can you use your hand as your yarmulke, as your head covering? So it depends. If it's for tznius, if it's for modesty, then you could. But if it's to actually have a head covering, then no, because it's not a head covering, it's more you. You can't cover you with you.
You can't make a bracha with it.
Correct. So if that's what it's for. So now, if you're talking about a double head covering, which al pi Kabbalah, there's a concept of two head coverings because there's two levels of makif, the chay and the yechida. Yeah. So then it makes sense that you could put your hand on top of your yarmulke. Why would that work for the double head covering? Why? Because you're something in between. Because the yarmulke already is the interposition, like a chetzitza. So then you could use your hand as a covering. But if you're just using it as the first covering, how can you cover yourself with you? It's just more you. It's an extension of you. So when we're saying that Havaya is not seen because it's covered by what? Nothing other than Hashem. There is nothing other than Hashem. It's covered by Elokim. Oh, so I'm not seeing Havaya, I'm seeing Elokim. But Havaya hu Elokim. So what we're explaining is that even when we're experiencing the net result of tzimtzum, we're really experiencing God. And that's how we can say ein oid, that there's nothing else. How can we say ein oid, there's nothing else? Because remember at the beginning of chapter 1, I told you that the way you could read that verse is there's no other God. And then I gave you the spoiler alert and I said, by the way, he's going to explain, the verse isn't coming to tell you there is no other God because, by the way, when I say this online, it's just so tedious for me. Whenever I say online this concept in Chassidus, that the verse Ein Oid is not coming to tell you there is no other God, the geniuses, I say that with full sarcasm, on YouTube all say, oh, he just said there are other gods. I would ask you to consult the second of the 10 Commandments. No, there are no other gods. When I say that the words Ein Oid do not come to say there is no other God, what that means is it is so obvious that there is no other God, that is clearly not what those words mean. Those words instead mean Ein Oid, there is no other, period. Full stop. There is no other. There's no other. There's God, and that's it. There's nothing but God. There's no existence other than God, which we're about to explain here at length in this chapter. There's no other existence. The only true existence is Hashem.
When you say we see Elokim, that means anything that we see.
Everything that we see. Yeah.
In my head, I think of it as like, I don't know, let's see a picture or even a letter. You take an aleph, the outline of the aleph, like the outer border is Elokim, and the colored in part is.
Well, he said before, he gave us the metaphor of containers and light.
Right.
Yeah, containers.
So in order to see anything, to differentiate.
Right, you see my coffee?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
The outer border.
No, it's
basically.
vodka.
Okay. Yeah.
All of our experience is interface with Elokim. Then how does that flow?
Whoa, stop. In the beginning of chapter 5, he said we get peaks of Havaya. Remember?
Okay, but how does that?
Do you remember in the beginning of chapter 5 when he said Hashem saw that if it were completely din, without any glimpse of Havaya, it would be unsustainable. So Shittuf Boy Midasarachim, he combined a little mercy in there. Mm-hmm. Remember, we got glimpses of Havaya through. Who remembers? Tzaddikim and miracles. Okay, but continue.
So how does that affect our relationship with our experience in the world? So if someone does harm or something harmful, so if everything is God,
Yeah, you're right.
how do we interact with the stimulus that's causing harm?
That's a wonderful question. Like, what do we do when we get hurt? And how do we reconcile that with the fact that it's all godliness? So that's the discussion in Igeres HaKodesh, which is the 4th section of Tanya, Simin Chof Hey, number 25. And actually over there, he explains that
4th section of Tanya.
there are 5 sections of Tanya. This is the second one. In chapter 25 of the 4th section of Tanya, he explains at length this concept. And those who are familiar with the second section of Tanya will recognize that there's a big, almost like a page of text that is 95% verbatim chapter 2 of Shaar, HaYichud, VeHaEmunah. The Kriyas Yamsuf part is, like, did a little cut and paste over to there. But at any rate, that question of how to emotionally deal with hardships and hurt, and when we know that it's all God, that's dealt with there in chapter 25. Let's continue here. Okay. Kishem Elokim, hold on a second, Memela Teda, right. There is no other. Peter, Shagam Ha'aretz, I said that, Kishem Elokim, Einem Mailam Matamtum Elul Tachtenim, V'loi Lagabe Kodesh Baruch Hu Miyachashuhu Shmei Elokim Echad, because Elokim is hiding Havaya from us, not from himself.
So I have a question about that.
Yeah.
If it's not hiding from Hashem,
Yeah.
then from his perspective, all is the same. Obviously, there's no good, there's no bad. It's all the same.
It's not all the same to him. The point is, he's not fooled by it. He sees the reality of it. So, of course, he sees the differences. He just understands that that's all a projection of himself.
So we don't have to let him know that we're experiencing.
No, you don't have to let him know we're experiencing pain. He knows it better than we know it. He feels it more acutely than we feel it. Yes. And therefore we can understand that the earth and everything below the earth is nothingness compared to Hashem. It doesn't have independent existence. And it doesn't have a name. You give a name to something to label it, exhibit A, exhibit B. Afilu b'shem oid shu lashon tafel. Not even the word oid. Ayin vav daled, oid. Oid means something else, something other. Ein oid means we're coming to negate the concept that you might think like this. The primary existence is Hashem. And then there's this oid, there's this other existence called creation. But it's tiny, it's minuscule, it's like a speck compared to Hashem. We're saying, no. Ain't oid. It's not even oid. It doesn't even make the cut to be called oid. Like the expression of our sages, they use the expression in certain contexts of providing a proof for a law. That when you have Yehuda, meaning a custom of the land of Yehuda, why would you bring that as a backup when you already have an explicit verse? Likra means an explicit verse. Va'id means like it's superfluous, it's extra. So what we're saying is created existence isn't even oid. It's not even a superfluous or extra or secondary or tertiary existence. Ukagein shu tafel l'neshama, ukaguf shu tafel l'neshama v'chai shebeseichei. I'll tell you what else it's not. Oid would be like the soul and the body. The body is called oid to the soul. And in fact, he says in brackets, v'zehu shekosav v'halal Hashem b'chayoi, azamul l'kai be'edi, which simple meaning is, I will praise Hashem during my life, I will sing to him during the rest of it, but there's a deeper explanation, which is, I will praise Hashem with chayai, with my life, meaning my soul. Azamra, I will sing to him ba'edi, with my other, meaning my body. Sha'chaim nimshachim m'shem avaya. Now you see there, when it says b'chayoi, my life, which is my soul, the name is Hashem. So the name associated with the life of the soul is Havaya. And then when it says ba'edi, my other, meaning my body, my other thing, this other thing, my body, it says le'lekai, which is Shem Elokim. Mishem Elokim. However, what we're explaining is, yes, in a certain way, soul and body, don't get confused. This is the most confusing part of this chapter and one of the most confusing spots in Tanya. Not because it's so deep, but because just the progression of the sentence is twisty-turny. trust me, I spent hours trying to figure out how to read this properly. So I'm saving you a lot of agony right now. You don't know the sweat that I put in to be able to read this sentence here. Okay. So he's saying creation is not even oid. For instance, what would be oid? The relationship between the body and the soul. The body would be like oid compared to the soul. And then he says body and soul is sort of like body is Elokim and soul is Havaya. That's where it gets confusing because he's just telling me that it's not oid. But what he's saying is the body and the soul is a something and a subservient something. A something and an oid. But that's not what Hashem is with creation. Okay. Because remember, the soul isn't bringing the body into being, something from nothing. The soul is interfacing with the body when it's already there. But Hashem is bringing everything into being something from nothing. Therefore, everything is completely nullified to him. Like the sunlight in the sun. And that's why the verse had to say so forcefully, you should know today and place it upon your heart. Because it is hard to remember. You might lapse into thinking of it as a body-soul type paradigm where there's a main thing and a secondary thing. We're saying, no, that's not what it is. There's an only thing and there's nothing else. Ein oid. It should not even occur to you that the heavens and all that are in them and the earth and everything in it is something separate from Hashem. And Hashem merely fills the world like a soul fills a body. And Hashem, for instance, gives the vegetative power to the plants. And he gives the power of movement to the orbits. And he starts them and stops them according to his will. Just like the neshama is the motor which gets the body to go. Don't think that. That's not correct. That would be a misunderstanding of what's going on. This is not the proper metaphor. Body soul is not the metaphor for creation creator.
Is it a metaphor for the body and soul even? It sounds like not.
That's a good question. Okay. Is body and soul even a good metaphor for body and soul? Okay, that's it. So within this context, he kind of holds on to the metaphor by... I'm trying to finish here, so I don't want to get into... Let's just proceed. Because the body and soul truly are two separate things from each other. Now you're saying nothing's really separate. You're right. Okay. But in the context of this metaphor. Your question basically is why the Alter Rebbe says these next couple lines, which were always funny to me, but it's basically to preempt your question. Okay. Because the body doesn't come from the soul. The body comes from the reproductive cells of the parents. And then even afterwards, the body is not merely is not growing because of the soul. When the fetus is in the womb, so it's growing from what the mother eats. And then after that, through what the person himself eats. Meaning, in a very immediate sense, the body has its source and its resources that keep it growing, and that's something quite distinct from the soul. All right.
Well, it's because Hashem's creating everything.
Yeah. But that's not the point right here. Okay. Masha'ein kain hashamayim va'aretz. But that's not true if you talk about the heavens and the earth. Shekol atzmusim mahusam nishavim ma'ayin ve'efes hamuchlat. They're coming from nothingness. They're coming from nothingness. Rak b'dvar Hashem v'ruch piv yisbarach. The only thing that's making them is Hashem's speech, like we explained at length. V'gam adayin nitzav dvar Hashem lo'elam b'shefei b'hem tamid b'chol rega. And even now that divine speech is continuing to prop them up. Umahava oisim tamid ma'ayin liyash, and to make them exist. Kisavos ha'oyer mahashemish b'seich guf kadr hashemish atzmi b'derech mashal. And like we're explaining, that really the true condition of all created existence is like the sun ray in the sun. V'im kain. And if that is so, heim betelim be'emes b'metzias legamin legabi dvar Hashem v'ruch pev yisbarach miyuchadim b'muhus v'atzmus yisbarach k'mei shi yisbar lekaman. Then everything, meaning all created beings, are truly nullified to the divine speech, which is totally united with Hashem's essence. The divine speech, as we're going to explain later, because you're going to say, well, what's the deal with the divine speech? The divine speech is totally united with Hashem, and creation is nothing but a product of the divine speech. If you extract the divine speech from creation, you don't get an empty shell. You don't even get an empty space where creation used to be. If you extract the divine speech from creation, you get it never was. So therefore, even now, when it exists in the way that we're comfortable pointing to it and saying that it exists, what we're really looking at is divine speech. Kibitol era shemesh ba shemesh. And truly, even now, the world is as nullified to Hashem as the sun rays are when they're in the sun. Even though we explain through Tzimtzum why it doesn't look that way. Rak shehein hein gvureisav. So then why does creation not look like sun rays in the sun? Why are we getting this phenomenon of the sun ray going away from the sun? So we explain, these are the gvureis of Hashem. These are his restraining powers. B'midas ha'gvura v'atzimtzum. His power of self-restraint and contraction, that he's able to conceal the life force that it's constantly flowing into creation and making it exist. And it makes the heavens and the earth appear as if they are something unto themselves. But again, it's a one-way mirror. Hashem is covering himself with himself. So he's not covered from himself. From Hashem's perspective, it's all naught. It's all the sun rays in the sun. Hashem's own midah of gvura doesn't conceal from his perspective. It's an extension of him. It's not a buffer between him and something else. It's more of him. Because in truth, there is nothing else. Because as we explain, Hashem, Havaya, that which is Mahava at all times, the source of creation, is Elokim begamatria hateva, that which hides Havaya. But they're both God, so in the end, it's all God. And therefore, consequently, if it's all God, ein oid, there is no otherness.